Well, welcome to Crosswinds Online. We are in the middle of a series, actually 3 weeks into a series, talking about barriers that get in the way of us and other people. And hey, if you missed the first couple weeks that gave context, don't worry, they're there for you to go back and watch anytime. So today, as we enter in to this time and into a story of Jesus where he helps everyone around him break down those barriers, can I invite you to just prepare yourself for what God might have for you? I find that worship is often such a good way to do that. It just puts all of our focus back on him, and it allows us to attend to the heart work that our faith equips us to do. So would you join us in this time of worship?
Tried to hide you and steal you away. Death tried to keep you inside of the grave. The enemy fought you, he tried but he lost. You cannot be stopped. For freedom, you tore down the walls. The weight of our burdens, you carried it all. Our fears and our failings hang dead on the cross. You cannot be stopped. Fighting my battle. Oh, you're fighting my battle. I believe there's nothing too big for you, God. And I sing there's nothing. Come on, sing there's nothing. Here we go. There's nothing that can stop our God. There's nothing that can stop our God. Yeah. There's nothing that can stop our God. There is nothing, come on, shout it out. There's nothing that can stop our God. There's nothing that can stop our God. Oh. There's nothing that can stop our God. There is nothing, there is nothing. Sing hallelujah, the battle is won. Nothing can stand against our God. Mover of mountains, breaker of chains, Jesus has triumphed over the grave. Sing hallelujah, the battle is won. Nothing can stand against our God. Sing hallelujah, the battle is won. Nothing can stand against our God. Oh. There's nothing that can stop our God. There's nothing that can stop our God. There's nothing that can stop our God. There is nothing. There is nothing. There's nothing that can stop our God. I believe it. There's nothing that can stop our God. There's nothing that can stop our God. There is nothing. There is nothing.
Let's start with this one.
In the US, these are chips. 100% just chips.
I can't believe you started with this one. These are chips.
We call these crisps. Next one.
This is a comforter.
Oh my God, how weird is the word comforter? That's weird. In Australia, that's called a doona.
I love that Emma is saying that the word comforter is weird, and then she goes to say that in Australia it's a doona. That's weirder, Emma. So in British English, this is a duvet, a duvet. I feel there's going to be a lot of conflict about this next one.
These are bell peppers.
Okay, they're capsicums. Red, green, yellow capsicums.
No! They're just plain old peppers. Red peppers, green peppers, and yellow peppers. Capsicum, what? This isn't Latin, this is English. Okay, another one that's going to cause a bit of conflict.
These are rain boots. And also the jacket that goes with it is a raincoat or a rain jacket. I guess in the US we like really clear, straightforward names for items like this. Rain boots. What's it for? It's for the rain. It's very clear. Boots for the rain.
When it's muddy and rainy, I would put my gum boots on to walk around in the wet.
In British English, we say wellies or welly boots. Are you ready for this next one? Are you ready? Because what Australians call these is frankly shocking. Let's hear from Vanessa first.
These are flip-flops.
Yeah, these are flip-flops, Emma. What do you call them?
When we go to the beach in Australia, we wear our thongs. Our thongs, it's plural, and we're talking about the shoes on our feet. They're our thongs.
So the next time it rains, just take off your gum boots and curl up in your doona and pretend you're in Australia, I guess. Isn't it fascinating how people, even that speak the same language, can communicate so differently? Well, today, Chris is going to unpack why that is. But before we get into that, I want to just share with you some ways to stay connected to life at Crosswinds. One of the ways I want to encourage you to do that is to follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram, because that is a way for you to stay connected to the events that are coming up, to get information about what's going on here on campus, to be reminded of some of the key takeaways from Sunday's message, and all sorts of things that you don't want to miss. And we'd love to hear back from you on those platforms as well. So follow us on social media, stay connected to your Crosswinds family. We have an opportunity to give in a different kind of way coming up here because the Bloodmobile is coming back to Crosswinds. If you feel so prompted to give in this way to literally save someone's life, I want to encourage you to go on the website and sign up for a time slot. I can't guarantee there won't be any pain, but I guarantee you it will be safe and pretty easy. We hope to see you there. Well, as always, we want to thank you for the ways that you have given financially to support Crosswinds. We know it is not easy to give, but we try to make it easy for those of you that have decided to do that. So we've got 3 ways that you can give, and it includes online as well as mailing a check in. We literally could not be this ministry without your generous support, so thank you so much for how you've been faithful in those ways. Well, getting back to that barrier, that wall that I told you we'd be talking about, Chris is going to be on in a few minutes to unpack that a little bit more. But for now, I want you to think back to what we watched just a few minutes ago, looking at how different people say different things. We decided to ask some people that are part of our Crosswinds family who have traveled internationally to share their experiences of how where you grew up changes your perspective. Check it out.
What's up, y'all? Aaron Horner here, sharing a few things that I've learned from my time visiting the Philippines.
In Africa, when there's a big ceremony or event, it turns out that the entire village will invite themselves if they haven't been formally invited.
There's a couple crazy things that I've learned, and one of the most shocking was that toilet paper is rarely used in the Philippines. It's mainly used to dry off, but what they do use is called a tabo.
When I was driving in South Africa, they told me to watch out for the robot at the bottom of the hill because it was hard to see. What they really meant was the traffic light or the stoplight or whatever you call it in this country.
And the horn out there, rather than being an anger thing, is used to say what's up, to let people know, hey, hi, hello. They go beep, beep, and then they pass each other. Beep, beep, pass each other. They're just constantly passing each other all over the road, and it looks like chaos, but it is safe in some ways. I don't know.
The first time I went to a church service, the first shock was that church can start as early as 6 a.m. and it typically goes for about 4 to 6 hours.
When I first moved to this country, I was having some work done in my house, and I asked the workers if they would like a brew. They looked very little startled at the thought of a beer, perhaps at 10 o'clock in the morning, but what I was really asking them is if they would like a cup of tea.
Some folks in the Philippines eat using a fork and a spoon, where they take the fork and they use it to push stuff into the spoon, eat off of the spoon. But if you go out into the province, in the indigenous Filipino culture, what you'll find is they eat kamayan style. Kamayan means with your hands. Scoop it up, eat it just like this.
In England, you post your postcards. You don't mail them. We post them in post boxes. Post boxes, also called pillar boxes, big red boxes that are easy to spot. But we also have blue boxes, a bit like a US mailbox, but those boxes are for you to clean up after your dog. So, guess where my American friend posted her postcards?
They do have a president, they do have governors, they do have mayors, but what they have is the smallest unit of government is called the barangay, and the person leading that is called the barangay captain, and that's basically the person in charge of your neighborhood. They actually are truly powerful, and it's at a very local level, somebody from that neighborhood that's voted in by that neighborhood.
One of the biggest faux pas I made in my first beginning travels to East Africa was the accidental greeting hug with the father of one of our students.
If you want to cross the street safely in South Africa, you would use the zebra crossing. In England, you would use the zebra crossing. And of course here, you would just use the crosswalk.
The problem with that is I indicated that I would be open to becoming his third wife with that hug. He then proceeded to ask Mark, my husband, how many cows would Mark like for me? I told Mark he better pick a really high number.
Bridges span the divide. Lands once separated by unattainable space, now connected one to another, crossing vast waters and gentle creeks, stretching mid-air over deep ravines. Whether formed of the strongest steel or old hewn wood, whether a feat of architecture or formed by nature itself. Bridges stretch wide their arms, making an impossible journey real, providing safe passage to those wishing to cross. There's connection and union where a separation used to be. But what happens when that path is obstructed and barriers emerge and walls land in the middle?
So I'm not one of those people who've lived everywhere, but I've lived a few different places around the country, and I've noticed an interesting phenomenon. People who are born in different regions have very different understandings of what is like normal, and even of what is right and wrong. When I was about 28, living in Los Angeles, I started interviewing with a church in Michigan to go be a pastor for their 20-somethings. It was a long interview process, generally went pretty well. Went out, visited in Michigan, spent time there, but I noticed that at one point, the process ground to a halt. So after a few weeks of wondering why they were dragging their feet and hiring me and trying to get an understanding of what was going on, I called them up and I said, where do we stand? And they said, well, we've just had this question we've been trying to work through. You've been living in Los Angeles for 6 years. Are you to California to work at our church in the suburbs of Detroit? I am not sure what to California means, but ultimately where they landed was that because I was born and raised outside Chicago, went to a school at a conservative Christian college near there, I probably had enough Midwest in me that we would match up. I took the job. Ended up working there 4 years before I got a call from a church in Las Vegas. And I remember telling the staff and the people in Michigan that I would be moving to Las Vegas. And they would say, Vegas? Be careful, Sin City, lots of bad stuff there. And then they would say, you don't think if you live there, you'll be tempted to gamble, right? Because the Bible says don't gamble. Well, I got to Vegas, and what I found was while people in Michigan thought gambling was a major no-no, in Vegas, it was just a way of life. Many people in our church worked in casinos. Many of them were table dealers at the very casinos the Michigan people told me to stay away from. In fact, the church in Vegas, when they invited us out to visit them, they put us up at a casino, at the Excalibur, with our newborn baby. And it was fascinating to me to see that people, and I guess I'm really talking church people here with this story, people thought that they based what they believed was right and wrong on the Bible, but actually it often had more to do with their geography than anything else. If you grew up in church in Michigan, you thought people from California were scary, and you thought gambling in Vegas would be bad. If you grew up in Vegas, it was just another way to pass the time, like at the Walgreens while you're waiting for your prescription to be filled. You could play a slot. All right, about halfway through my time in Vegas, we hired a worship pastor. His name was Jason. Jason was from North Carolina. It was my job to hire this position, and I remember worrying a little bit about whether Jason was going to be a little bit too Bible Belt for us, like how would he click in Vegas being from North Carolina? Well, Jason clicked fine, but I remember one day I was walking through a casino with him on our way to lunch, because in Vegas, if you want to go to lunch, it's probably in a casino. And I remember being pummeled with the smell of cigarette smoke as we walked in the casino, and Jason saying, smells so good. And me going, huh? And Jason saying, man, I miss the, I'm trying to do Jason's accent. I'm sorry if you're from North Carolina because this is bad, but man, I miss the smell of everyone walking out of church on Sunday in a big group and lighting up their cigarettes. And me going, what? and him saying, North Carolina, yeah, tobacco country, man. Everyone smokes. And I thought, oh my gosh, in California, Michigan, even Vegas, that would have been taboo. You're hurting your body. Your body's a temple of the Lord. Why would you do that? North Carolina church people, not even a consideration. One day, I got a call from one of our elders at the church. Our worship band had been seen on a Sunday after church at Buffalo Wild Wings. And he said, I'm calling to let you know, Chris, they were drinking beer. I said, yeah? And he said, don't you think that's a problem? And I said, no, why? And he said, because they were just on stage leading our church in worship 2 hours before. And if someone from the church were to go to Buffalo Wild Wings and see them drinking right after leading worship, they'd think that they're not sincere Christians or that they're hypocrites. I said, hypocrites or fake Christians? What are you talking about? We don't think it's a sin to drink alcohol. I mean, Jesus drank wine. And he said, yeah, but on a Sunday? And I am not joking. The church elders decided to have a meeting, and they made a rule that the band could not drink in public on a Sunday after leading worship. In the privacy of your own home or on a Tuesday, yes, but not at a restaurant or a bar, not in public. Imagine my relief when a few years later I was out here having lunch with John Merritt, the founding pastor of Crosswinds, talking about my potentially joining the staff here. We just finished our Sunday services together. We sit down to lunch. First thing John orders is a nice cold beer. It is just a thing that I have noticed everywhere I go. Every region, every church, or every group of people have their thing that does not seem to make sense outside of that place, but is just certain for those who live there and have called that place home. And what I'm describing for you is something called worldview. Worldview is a particular way of seeing or understanding the world around you. And when I say that, I mean morality, like what's right and wrong, understanding what's just, understanding what's fair. I mean wisdom, like what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. Worldview is all about where you have spent time standing, what spot that you view the world from. People view things, they have a worldview based on their unique position. And your position might be geographical, like in my story, or it might be based on the family you grew up with and what they taught you. That became your worldview. Worldview might have to do with the subculture of people that you work with. Like if you've worked as a long-haul truck driver most of your adult life and your time on the road is spent with other long-haul truck drivers, chances are good you have similar worldviews from your time together. And worldviews certainly come from faith. If you believe in God, what God you believe in, who you worship. Although, as I said before, sometimes not as much as you think. Sometimes you think your worldview is a faith worldview when it's really a family worldview or a geographic worldview. Well, I bring this up today because I want to tell you about a third brick wall that gets thrust down in the middle of the bridges we're trying to build with people that we disagree with. And it has something to do with worldview. And this third brick wall is worldview protection. We talked about ego protection 2 weeks ago. No one wants to be the loser. If we're in an argument and we're going to try and bridge that divide, one of the things that stands in the way is someone trying to tell you that you're wrong or you're a fool, making you out to be a villain. We talked about team loyalty last week as the second brick wall, that sometimes the team we identify with clouds our judgment. Well, today, the third brick wall you need to know about that regularly gets in the way of two different sides coming together is worldview protection. And here's what it is. The sense that I have to protect my way of life, my way of thinking, and that if you don't agree with me, you might be a threat to ruin it. Let me say that again. I've been brought up to see the world a certain way, maybe by my family, by my faith, by my friends, and that worldview I've got, it causes me to believe A, B, C about whatever topic that we disagree on, and you have a different worldview based on your family and your faith and your friends and your geography. And worldview protection is when someone even subconsciously starts to think, I am worried that as we try to bridge the divide, you will somehow ruin me or steal away what I have always known. I'm afraid that your worldview will somehow weaken or stain or convince me of something that I don't want to be convinced of, because then it will shake my whole world. If you mess with my worldview, what you're messing with is my world. When I was in high school, I dated a girl for a little while who was 1 year older than me. I was a junior, she was a senior. I couldn't drive yet, she could. That's how you know you're in the big leagues. Anyway, she graduated before me, and she went off to college. I started my senior year of high school. And I remember her coming back after her first semester and telling me about some classes she had that were taught by priests. She went to a Catholic university, some classes on the Bible, and she'd been taught that the Bible was written by men instead of by God. And she was questioning whether or not we should live according to everything that the Bible says, because if this is just the words of men, what's the point, right? Truth is, she was doing what a lot of kids do in college, what you're supposed to do. She was questioning her worldview. It's actually a good thing that leads, hopefully, to a reconstruction of your faith. It makes it your own. It's new. It's better. But I heard it, and I was not in a questioning stage of my life yet. I was very black and white still, and I heard this, and I reacted. What? What kind of dating relationship can we have if you aren't willing to listen and to follow the Bible, the guidebook for my life? This is over. And we broke up what I think was a pretty good relationship over that one issue. What was going on in me? Worldview protection. Your new worldview is a threat to mine. And you know, this doesn't just happen in dating relationships and with people that you're close to. We see it happen in all sorts of environments, especially when it comes to politics, people's religion. We hear all sorts of voices trying to convince you that if you associate with the other side, people with a different worldview, it could ruin yours. If you give an inch, they'll take a mile. If you say yes to this, it's going to be a slippery slope towards something way worse. All right, all of those messages are meant to play on your need for worldview protection. They're meant to scare you into not crossing over the bridge to the other side. And what happens is this thing in us that does not like to have our worldview challenged becomes a brick wall. It keeps unity from happening. So today, I want to show you a story where Jesus tears that wall down. Before I do, I have a fear today that as you've listened so far, you've thought, oh yes, I know someone like that who feels like they need to protect their worldview. They won't let you challenge them on anything. That's not me though. Okay, please, today, don't be thinking about the person that you disagree with. Think about you and the way your sense of threat gets in the way. And here's what I think. I think if you'll take a close look at the story with me, that Jesus will shake your understanding of how to feel and interact and do life with people who are on the other side of a brick wall from you. All right, the story we're going to look at is in Mark 4. And I want to give you a little background so that you can see the worldview stuff happening in this story. You might know that early in their history, God's people get promised a promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey that is going to be theirs forever. But what often gets lost in the telling of that story is that there were people already there in that land. The Israelites had to drive out those people so they could make the land their own. Now, I don't know how you feel about that. Maybe not so good. Let me tell you how they justified it. When they got to this place, the people who were there were worshiping a god named Baal. And Baal was kind of this god of storm and rain. And because they needed to grow their crops with that rain, the people's lives and their ability to make it was tied to Baal. Well, here's where it gets interesting. The people who worshiped him thought that Baal was excited by violence and by sex. And so the things that they would do to honor Baal and get him to smile on them and make it rain, it involved cutting themselves. And here's what they honestly hoped, that the smell of their blood would wake up Baal and get his attention. And this involved all sorts of brutal stuff, child sacrifice. The basic thought was, let's stimulate Baal's emotions with what we do down here. The more violent, the more perverse, the more chaotic, the better, because that will cause Baal to do similar chaotic things in heaven, which in turn will bring chaotic storms and rain down to the earth. So God and his people, they look at all the different people worshiping Baal in their new promised land, and they see people who don't just disagree with them about what God to follow. They're drastically, what I want to call today, on the other side. That's important, that phrase. You can see why that matters. Well, these people had to go somewhere when they were driven out of the promised land. And most biblical scholars have come to the realization that when they left, when they were expelled, they left the promised land and they settled on the east side of the Sea of Galilee. Many of them ultimately settled over here. It's not very far from the promised land. In fact, it's just on the other side of the sea from the people who are God's people, other side of the Sea of Galilee. Now, look, there's that phrase, other side again, which means that at some spots, these two groups with very different views were only 7 or 8 miles away from each other across what is a huge lake. Now, can I tell you what the people Jesus grew up with called that area across the sea? They had a few names for it. Land of the Seven, Decapolis, but informally, they had taken to calling it the other side. The other side, because it was on the other side of the sea, but the other side because it was also where people view things differently than we do. And if we want to protect ourselves, we would be smart to never go to the other side, because that is where the evil, not good, anti-God, don't live like us people live. If we're Michigan, that's California. If we're conservative church people, that's Vegas. If we're church leaders who care a little too much about our image, those people are Buffalo Wild Wings on a Sunday. They're the people who do not live like us, think like us, believe like us, and because of it, they make evil, dark choices. And if we're not careful, we could get hurt on the other side. I want you to know that, in fact, at some point, the land itself became so associated with these people who had been driven out, driven away, the Jews considered it evil land over there, evil ground to walk on. They believed that the area was dominated by the devil. They rarely visited the area, even though it was just across a 7-mile wide sea, what is essentially a lake. Well, the Bible tells us in Mark 4, verse 35, it says, "One day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.'" Jesus says this, "Let us go over to the other side." Dun, dun, dun. You know, the disciples must think he is absolutely nuts. Why in the world would we go over there to those evil people? The whole reason that our ancestors drove them away was so we wouldn't have to deal with them and the worldview that they bring. You want to go to the other side? But he's Jesus. What are you going to say? No? Verse 36, leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was, in the boat. There were also other boats with him. Now, look at what happens in verse 37. It says, "A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him, and they said to him, 'Teacher, don't you care if we drown?'" Now, what I have not told you yet is that as much as they thought that the other side, the east side, was evil land, they thought that the sea was pretty evil as well. And I don't have time to get into all of it, but you've heard all those old sailing stories about sea monsters and sea storms. These guys were terrified as they struggled against this storm. And the reason wasn't just that the boat was getting swamped. People from the promised land thought of the sea as an abyss where evil spirits lived. That's also part of their worldview. And so they start to cross the sea and they leave God's promised land and they go to the other side, which is evil territory. God doesn't seem to have much of a stronghold over there. And you can just imagine that out on the sea, they're thinking, uh-oh, maybe this God Baal who brings rain and storms, maybe he's real, and maybe he's upset that we're going over to his land and he's causing a storm to stop us right now and keep us from visiting all those evil Baal followers. Now, let me just stop right there and make a point. I want to make sure we don't miss this. And it's the first thing we need to do to begin tearing down the wall of worldview protection. You ready? Realize that if your worldview tells you that someone or something is evil, you will find ways to confirm it. if you have a worldview that tells you that something is wrong and you shouldn't do it, or some people are either misguided, idiotic, or worse, they're out to get you and ruin your way of life, you will find ways to have that worldview confirmed. Have you heard of confirmation bias? When somebody so believes that something is true, they see it everywhere they look, or they see examples of it. If I believe that one political party is tax and spend, when that party's in office, I see that happening everywhere I look, even if my own party spent even more. If I believe that one party is anti-human rights, then I see every disagreement over policy toward the marginalized as racist or sexist, or maybe they're trying to even suppress voters. I'm not saying that both of those things aren't sometimes true. I think they are. But worldview protection and confirmation bias make us think that they are always true. We see it everywhere we look. And if you're going to tear down this brick wall so that you can bridge a divide with someone you disagree with, you have got to realize that your worldview might be convincing you some things are true, confirming some things to be true that are not actually true. Let's keep going. A huge storm starts, and their worldview is confirmed, and they wake Jesus up saying, "We knew it! We never should have thought about going to the other side. It's evil land full of evil people, and even crossing this 7-mile stretch of water is risky and not God-honoring. Why did you do this to us?" All right, verse 39 says, Jesus got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." And then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And they were terrified, and they asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." They say, "Wow, this man that we're following can even harness the power of God to overcome nature and possibly evil." Get this. They realize this man can bring God with him wherever he goes, even to the other side. Oh, and here's the second thing you need to realize that will help tear down your wall. Realize that you don't need to protect your worldview, because no matter where you stand and view things, you will find God there with you. Your worldview doesn't need you to protect it, because you have God's protection over your heart and your mind and your soul. You will never find yourself someplace where God has not been. There's not a danger that when you cross your bridge to the other side, that God will not be there, able to protect you for you. You're not children who might need to be protected from bad influences because a day may come when your parent's not there to make sure they make the right choice. No, because wherever you go, your heavenly Father is going to be there. And you don't need to protect your worldview, because if, God forbid, he said with sarcasm, you find yourself convinced by the other person to change your view, and that changes your world, and now you find yourself in a new place viewing things from a new angle, God will be there too. So, second one, your worldview does not need you to protect it. God has got this. All right, now, they finish their boat ride to the east side of the sea, and unlike wherever they would stop on the west side, there are not crowds there waiting for Jesus, or people who are like, "Come heal me." Jesus comes there, a relative nobody, and as they get out of the boat, there is one man there to meet them. Take a look at chapter 5, verse 2. It says, "When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart, and he broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him." So picture this. They pull up on their boat to what is essentially a cemetery, and a crazy zombie-like guy comes running out from among the tombs to talk to them, and I can just imagine the disciples getting out of the boat and them saying, "Way to go, Jesus. This is why we don't come over here. The people are evil. They worship Baal. It's an evil land with evil people. How much more obvious could it be? They're all like the zombie guy over here." Probably more confirmation bias, right? And I'll just point out something I find really interesting. Remember how I told you that one thing these people used to do to get Baal to send rain and do his thing was cut themselves? Take a look at verse 5. It says, night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. I just think it's important to say, as much as hundreds of years have passed since they were driven out of the promised land, and as much as they were probably on to new things, some of this stuff from their past is so dark, it never goes away. So this man comes down and he falls on his knees in front of Jesus. And the Bible tells us that he shouts, "What do you want with me? Don't torture me." But it tells us it's not the man shouting, it's these demons in him. And they beg Jesus to not send them out of the area. They say, just don't make us leave this land. We like living here on the other side, the dark side. Don't mess with our dark side thing. Okay, third point. I know the first two were about the disciples, but can I apply this one to the man that they meet in his side of the brick wall? If you want to tear down the wall, realize there is something spiritual happening in our stubbornness and our unwillingness to see something through someone else's eyes. When we are unwilling to hear somebody else's worldview, to try and stand where they stand for a minute or an hour, that probably reflects something spiritually not right going on in us. The Bible credits this guy's desire to not leave the area with these demons in him that do not want to go over to Jesus' side, to that worldview. Let me say it again. To tear down the wall, we've got to realize there is a spiritual battle happening in us that wants us to be stubborn and unwilling. I'll say for me, I believe that there is an evil one. There are evil forces in this world, and I think he does his best work convincing people, and this includes Christians, that their worldview is right, that they have to protect it, and they cannot listen to somebody else's view, because if they hear it or even allow it to be voiced, allow it to exist, then what? What are we afraid of? Then we might find out we're wrong? Then we might start doubting everything else that we believe? If our worldview turns out to be wrong, it might shake our world and our way of life might go away? That is fear. That's all fear. And that fear comes from something spiritual going on in you, causing you to put up a brick wall. Now, I'm not suggesting that in you or the person who's disagreeing with you, there is demonic possession keeping you from getting to a place where you can agree. But I am saying our unwillingness to break down this wall is more often the result of a spiritual problem than it is just a difficulty having a meeting of the minds. Now, where this story goes, Jesus sends these demons into a herd of pigs, and the pigs throw themselves down a hill into the sea, and they drown, and this man is healed or made sane again, or he's delivered from his condition. And in that action, I want you to catch the fourth and final thing, but you've got to see it in the context of the big picture. Remember, years and years earlier, God's people drive other people out of the promised land. They see these people as evil. They do this to make their land holy and clean. The driven out people go to the other side, but Jesus comes on the scene, and unlike the people before him, he says, let's leave our holy promised land and go over there. He meets one of the driven out people, and instead of shunning him as evil, turning his back, walking the other way, Jesus takes the evil and he drives it out of him. Do you see that world-changing shift? Jesus has changed the worldview for his disciples and where they've come from. Their national history, their religious history, the story, the worldview has changed. Jesus says, I'm not about driving evil people out of my holy world. That's what we used to do. I am about driving evil out of people and making them holy. Let me say that again. Jesus is not about driving evil people out of his holy world. He's about driving evil out of people and making them holy. Jesus puts a person in front of his worldview. And that is the fourth thing. Realize that if your worldview doesn't put the other person first, it's the wrong worldview. Jesus did not go on a rampage to clear the world of people who had a different worldview. He went and engaged them where they stood. and he brought them over to his side, although not entirely. The way the story ends is that the townspeople are freaked out by Jesus doing this. He's rocking their worldview, and they ask him to leave because this is not a land where this kind of activity fits their paradigms. Jesus, leave. You're not wanted over here on the other side. And verse 18 tells us that something very significant happens. It says, as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. This guy who had been a driven out one says, let me go back with you to the warm and safe and inviting Holy Land. Now that I'm no longer an evil one, now that I've been made clean, take me home with you. Now that I have it together, can I please go back? This guy says in verse 18, Jesus, take me with you. And in verse 19, we read, Jesus did not let him, but said, go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he's had mercy on you. So the man went away, and he began to tell the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. Jesus has broken the wall, but it's not to try and bring everyone across to his world, right? It's to bring his world to them. And now that he's done it, he's going to leave somebody there to keep doing it. So the story of the other side ends that Jesus goes back over to the promised land, leaves that guy there to spread the word. And a little while later, we're not exactly sure how long, Jesus goes back. He goes back to the land of the seven, to the Decapolis, to the other side. And this time, there are some people waiting to be healed. Wonder how they found out that God could deliver them from their problems. He causes one deaf man to hear, a mute man to speak, and then almost out of nowhere, a crowd of 4,000 people gather to hear him teach. The wall is down and the bridge is open for business because Jesus knew what was more important than protecting his worldview was just getting across to the other side.
I will sing of your goodness. I will sing of your love. Though the seasons come quickly, you have always been enough. Though the night may get darker, though the waiting seems long, you have always been faithful to remind me of your love. Come on. You are good. In the morning I'll sing you are good. In the evening I'll sing you are good. You are good to me. You have always been patient. You have always been kind. And you're consistent through the ages. Oh, what a friend of mine. And I'll remind my soul to bless you, standing firm upon your truth, knowing you cannot be shaken, 'cause I've seen what you can do. Oh, you are good. In the morning I'll sing you are good. In the evening I'll sing you are good. You are good to me. Sing it out. You are good. In the morning I'll sing you are good. In the evening I'll sing you are good. You are good to me. Keep on getting better. Keep on getting better. Oh, you keep on getting better. Keep on getting better. Sing it out. You keep on getting better. Keep on getting better. Oh, you keep on getting better. You keep on getting better. Yeah, keep on getting better. Keep on getting better. Yeah. evening I'll sing you are good. You are good to me. Sing it, keep on getting better. Let's sing this out. Oh, keep on getting better. Keep on getting better. Yes, you do. Keep on getting better. Keep on getting better. Remind my heart. Keep on getting better. Keep on getting better. Keep on getting better. Keep on getting better. And God, it's a truth that you don't change, God, but it's also a truth that you are consistently growing us, that you are forming us and reforming us, shaping us and reshaping us until our understanding of you, our perception of you has changed, God. I'm just so grateful because I know that you love watching me grow. You love watching me come to bigger and greater awarenesses of your faithfulness, of your mercy, of your heart for justice, of your love for people who aren't like me, God. I'm grateful, God. Thank you so much. And everyone said, amen.